They don't see me as a strong, independent woman. They see, oh, poor thing. And that's not it. That's not it at all.
Hi, beautiful people.
Hi, beautiful people.
Today we are talking to Precious Perez. She is a singer-songwriter born in Massachusetts, and she has been blind since birth. So hi, Precious.
Hi.
Before we get started, we do want to acknowledge that right now we're in the middle of the riots and everything going on with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. Could you give me your perspective on maybe when you even realized race as a concept and how it feels to have to conceptualize that as someone that obviously wouldn't naturally move through the world assessing people by that?
I think I'm trying, because it's interesting because I've never thought about it.
Really? Okay.
It's not something I've ever really thought about, like, oh wow, black and white, because I'm not somebody that has ever had sight, and I've never been curious about how people look. Like,
really,
I have body image issues myself, because it ties into, like, I can't see myself and I can't compare myself to anything else. So when people make comments about my body or me or the way that I look, I already have anxiety, so I will fixate on those things and like question them and question myself, and it's a whole thing. But when it comes to other people, I really genuinely like don't care. I'm like, okay, it doesn't matter what you look like as long as your heart's good. If your heart's ugly, then I don't want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
I just don't think about looks. Like, I've had people ask me, like, do you want to feel my face? Okay, that's the first stereotype that I will say. We do not do that unless it's a partner or like, we don't actually do that when we meet people. That's a little invasive and kind of weird.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's get into some of the weeds of these misconceptions and everything. Thank you so much for your perspective on what's going on right now. It's very beautiful. I know that it's a complicated, very interesting issue when you're coming from a church background.
Oh yeah.
Because you're also talking about people praying for you to have sight and you saying, I don't even want to see. So can you relay a little bit about that story that you told me about what it's like to have people lay hands on you without your consent?
So I think the first experience I had with that was when I went to my great-grandfather, who is, he's now in heaven, but he was a pastor in a Pentecostal church. And I remember I was kind of in the kids area, like enjoying my Easter egg. I don't know, I think it was Easter, and I was about 5 years old. And then I had to go downstairs. My mom said, you gotta come downstairs. And so I went downstairs, and the next thing I know, everybody's hands are on me. There's hands on my back, on my head, like on my eyes, and people screaming and like praying and like hallelujah. And I'm just going, what's happening? Because I'm a kid and I'm like, this is weird. Like, what is going on? Like, I'm fine. I don't understand what's happening. And I think a lot of the time is, disabled people get told, oh, they mean well. They're just trying to be nice. Just let them do what they're going to do. But I don't think that's appropriate, because if it were somebody doing something to somebody else that wasn't right, or, touching them without consent, you don't just let them do that because they mean well or whatever. I think there's a way to acknowledge, like, hey, that's not appropriate. Let me educate you on what you should and can do, and let me give you a little bit of insight. Like, I prefer to approach it where I can educate somebody, and, I'm a human, and some days I don't want to. Some days I just want to scream and be like, leave me alone. I'm on my way. I have something to do. Like, we all have our bad days, and, we can't all be an ambassador for the community all the time, and that's a lot to carry. Yeah. But I personally like to educate, because my thing is, there's still so much ignorance around disability and around blindness specifically still prevalent in society and in a lot of spaces. And so if we don't educate, people just aren't going to know better. And it's true in the church too. Like, a lot of disabled people that I've spoken to and in the community have had issues with inclusivity in church. Whether church have made you feel unwelcome or it's made them feel like, it's not accessible. Some of them have those screens where the lyrics pop up on the screens, and blind people can't read those. And the whole there's a lot to unpack as far as people in church go, because Christians are taught that disability is something to be pitied, that disability is something that needs to be fixed, that's broken, that God's going to heal all of these people and all of us. Like, I've had people stop in stores and pray for me and tell me that I would see in 24 hours because that was what God wanted, or that Jesus would heal me, or
and
all
then
manner
you
of
don't
those
have
kind of
enough
things.
faith because you didn't get healed.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I've never had the negative end of that, but it's always people pitying me or thinking that I'm incapable of doing something or just living my life, or thinking that I'm absolutely amazing for microwaving a plate of food or carrying a bowl of soup down the stairs.
Oh.
It's wild. And I don't blame them too much, because when you don't know any better, what else are you supposed to do? You take the knowledge that you have and you do with it what you can. But what bothers me are people that aren't willing to change their mindset and are just never going to understand. And that's the point where I have to recognize that and say, this isn't worth my time or my space, because I can only give so much, and I have to take care of myself too. And sometimes there are some people that are just never going to understand. Unfortunately, that has resolved in me having to love people from a distance. There's some family that I just can't associate myself with because of the way that they view me, and they're always going to see me as a child and as somebody that's incapable and as somebody that can't live a full life. And that's not something I need to have around me.
Yeah.
I love them so much, but I just can't. I can't surround myself with that in any way, shape, or form. And there's this whole thing where, like, family is family and you're obligated to treat them a certain way, and I just don't believe that. I think that if somebody is toxic to me and my well-being and my ability to be happy, then I'm not obligated to keep them in my circle.
I just want to commend you so much for 2 points that you made in that. So we're starting to realize that even children deserve autonomy and deserve to tell us whether or not they feel safe or comfortable with people touching them or being touched. So I think it's just so important that you, as a faith-based person going into these spaces, has the courage and tenacity, which you shouldn't have had to do, but like, thank you for standing in that gap to say, I deserve to have consent over who's touching my body, even if it's prayer hands. You still have to ask. I think that's so important. And then also your points of like, yes, family is blood. And, but I feel the same way, especially with like LGBTQ audience and people with mental health issues, all of it. If you're being alienated or mistreated by anyone that is your family, you have a right to put up boundaries that are healthy for you without worrying whether, how that's going to affect the person that has been hurting you, even if they had, quote, good intentions. So was it a journey to get to that place where you not only realized you had a right to believe those things, but that you had a right to impart those truths to other people?
I think my mom has really been, my biggest role model and my biggest rock ever since I was born, because, she had me when she was 15.
Oh, wow.
So she was a single mom for basically my entire life until my stepdad came into the picture and, all of that. But she was who raised me, and she always taught me, like, you're not going to be different than other people. You're going to grow up like everyone else. You're going to do the things that everyone else does, and you're going to do what makes you happy. And, she always told me, as far as, anything goes with family or anything like that, it's your decision what you need to do for yourself.
What a wonderful woman. Who raised
Yeah,
this
she's
woman? She's wonderful.
Jennifer Alvarez. Shout out to mom.
Shout out, mom.
But yeah, she's fantastic, and like she's very strong, very independent, and I think I got a lot of that from her because, she raised me to not take any kind of anything from anyone and just do what I have to do and go out there and just kind of live the life I wanted to live.
So can I ask you, well, you've already given me permission to ask you, how you would prefer people to be approaching you and treating you? Because we talked again in our conversation about how so many of us are taught that someone, with blindness, for example, is someone to be pitied. And you kind of walk up to them and you're like, hi, and do that whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, I can only imagine how infuriating and tiresome that must be. So if that's not the approach, it's like, what is the approach?
So I think the best is to just, we're people before anything else. Like we are equals, despite what society has taught everybody. We are just as capable, whether you're blind, whether you're in a wheelchair, whether you do anything like that. We have adaptive ways of doing things and we do things differently, but that doesn't mean that we can't do things. And so I think the best thing to do is just like not even, it doesn't need to be acknowledged unless there's something where like you need help or you want to figure out if somebody needs your help, going somewhere and say like, hey, like what's the best way to help you? Is do you need help with anything? And just asking the questions, don't be afraid to ask. And also, blind isn't a bad word. Like people think that the word blind is like oh no, you can't call it what it is. No, that's what it is. Like people are so afraid to say it. They'll find any way around it, find any other manner of words to string together to amount to the same thing because they think that it's a bad word, like that I'm going to get offended if they call me what I am. So there's nothing wrong with saying the word blind. There are some people that prefer visually impaired. Some people have low vision, so they're low vision. They have some vision and not a lot. Like there's so many degrees. So I can only speak to my personal experience and the way that I do things. And that's another misconception. Like people think that like when you say blind, you're totally blind or whatever, or that, sometimes people assume that because you're blind, you're deaf too. And some people are, don't get me wrong, but not everybody is.
So they just go yelling at you.
They see Helen Keller and they think, oh wow, so everybody's that way. So I don't think any kind of assumption is good, because there are so many people on the spectrum and varying degrees of vision, varying degrees of doing things. There's no one way. There's no one person that's going to be the same as anybody else, because like everyone, nobody's the same. So I think probably just to, it's just to treat us like normal people. Say, hey, how are you? You can say like, I'm putting out my hand, because sometimes it's super awkward. Like you'll stick out your hand to shake it and somebody's not, their hand isn't out, or the hand is full and you don't know, and you're like, ugh. So it's awkward. But like, it's fine. It's no big deal. Like I'll be the first person to make blind jokes because I feel like it breaks the ice, but it makes people so uncomfortable. And I'm like, guys, if I'm laughing, you should be laughing. It's hilarious. But it makes them so uncomfortable.
The sense of humor is so disarming, and it really is such a beautiful invitation. I love the notion that you can disarm people that way. It's beautiful. Yeah. What are some things not to do? You say don't lay hands on, don't,
definitely don't just assume you know where somebody's going, because there are people that like, I've crossed the street and I'm going to turn away and they're like, no, you're going this way. And I'm like, actually, no, I'm going this way. Like, you don't know where I'm going, so please stop. Also, I've had people like grab my arm, or like I'm standing at a street corner and I'm waiting to cross because, people think that some people have like honked their horns at me to like indicate to go, and that helps not at all. Like,
Right.
or they'll tell me it's safe to cross, and as soon as they tell me that, a car zooms through the intersection in front of me, and I'm like, yeah, no. So I don't, I have alternative techniques. I went to training, and I took, special classes for orientation mobility for exactly that reason, to learn how to analyze traffic by hearing and like use traffic lights and stuff like that. So like, I'm more cautious than anything else. But I've had people like insist on grabbing my arm or like helping me across, and it's fine, but you can't touch people. You just can't. That's not that's not
Rule
okay.
of thumb.
If you can't touch somebody that's sighted, you can't touch somebody that's blind, you can't touch somebody that's in a wheelchair. You cannot just put your hands on people for any reason unless they let you do that, unless you ask if we need help and we say yes, can I take your arm or something. And even now with like COVID-19, I don't want to take somebody's arm. Like, what? So I think just being mindful of boundaries, and the fact, like, again, it comes down to us being people.
Yeah.
We're not like, some people look down on us like we're children. That's called infantilization. They think that we're children, like they talk down to us like we're children. They think we're not capable of being sexual beings, of having children, of having jobs, of living lives where somebody isn't taking care of us day and night, like somebody always has to be with us or something. It's insane. And it really just stems from so much ignorance, because you don't see portrayals of that in media, of blind people living full lives, of doing things like anyone else would. You don't see that in movies. People were raised to not ask questions. Kids ask questions. Sometimes the parents will be like, shh, don't say that. Don't ask that. That's not okay. No, ask all the questions. I personally would rather answer the ignorant questions than have people wonder and assume the wrong thing. Like, ask away. I'll answer all day long. Like, I'm not it's very interesting, the way
I wonder,
that people
though,
react.
yeah, I appreciate your perspective. I wonder if a good first question to ask is like, can I ask you questions? Is that an okay question to ask? Because you're talking about you shouldn't have to walk around 24/7 being an advocate for the entire, representation.
And sometimes people just think it's okay to ask personal questions like, oh, how did you lose your sight? And like, I'm personally really open, so I don't care. But there are people that don't want to answer those questions all the time. So I think it's important to just be like, hey, are you cool with me asking you some questions? Because I just want to learn more. Like, that's totally cool. Like, I think people would appreciate that more than, oh, so how'd you lose your sight? Do you believe in God? Do you think that God's gonna, like, because then that opens the door for all these questions, and this person's just trying to like get home, or trying to like, they've had a long day, who knows what they've gone through, and now they're getting bombarded with questions about their disability when that's the last thing they want to deal with right now. So I think approaching it in a very open way, and just, we're people like anyone else. I think people are afraid of offending, and that's understandable, but also you're not going to know if you don't ask.
Yeah. Can I ask too, Christian woman to Christian woman?
Yes.
Your theological stance on this. We have these verses and stories of Jesus going out and healing the blind and sick, and then Jesus leaves and he says, you will do greater things than me. I believe I know what that means now in a very different way than I used to, but I understand that most Christians will take that and say, so that means we're going to perform these miracles, that I too will walk on water. And therefore there's this imperative to, quote, heal what we perceive to be broken. So just what is your theological stance on all of that? How can we help educate churches so they stop approaching people in this way?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting because the Bible can definitely be interpreted in many different ways, and some people choose to interpret it in a way that can be weaponized, and some people choose it to, justify whatever they personally believe as individuals. And so, my personal belief on all of this is that, as far as I go, I was made and put on this earth exactly the way I am. I'm supposed to be here exactly the way I am, to leave the world a better place than when I found it, and to use the gifts that I've been given to amplify the good and to glorify God through those gifts that I've been given. I think it's an unpopular opinion because that's not, I guess, directly, a lot of people would say not what the Bible says. It says, Jesus will heal, these are miracles that if the blind can see and this, that, and the other. And I think it's meant to say that Jesus is all, God is all powerful. God can do all things. But if we're all fearfully and wonderfully made, and we're made in God's eyes, in God's vision, in God's love, then he doesn't make mistakes. Me being blind on this earth in this moment isn't a mistake. Somebody else in a wheelchair, somebody else with any other disability on this earth is not a mistake. And, if the way that I look at it, if I was meant to be healed, it would have happened already. And maybe I am meant to be, I don't know. I have no idea. None of us know that. None of us have any answers to the things that we're completely curious about death, about anything.
Yeah.
But I'm not banking on the fact that, maybe one day God will give me my sight back. Because, I understand it's different for people that have lost their vision in the middle of life. That's a completely different thing. I never had it, so I can't miss it. And, I know people who have never had vision but are curious to see what it would be like, and that's cool too. Everybody's got their own perspective. I personally think that my life is perfect the way it is. I'm happy, and I wouldn't have had half the opportunities that I have today if it weren't for me being blind. And I think that I'm meant to do something with what I've been given here.
I love that.
And I think that's part of who I am, and it's always going to be part of who I am. And my fiance is actually blind as well. And, This is a journey that we're on together of, performing and using music to kind of just debunk misconceptions without having to even say anything.
I did want to talk to you next about these opportunities that you're speaking of, because you're talking about how you're getting educated at a specific institution, and you're really having to educate them on how to best uplift and help you in the process of learning, because they weren't used to a blind person being in the program, correct?
Yeah. So I go to Berklee College of Music in Boston, and it's one of the top music school, contemporary music school in the country, all those good things. I come from a low income background, so literally the only thing keeping me there is scholarships, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for, I come from, multiple minorities, being Hispanic, being a woman, being blind, having mental health issues, all those things. But the first thing that people see is blindness. That's the physical thing. It's the thing people look at right when they see me. They see the white cane. They're like, oh, wow, she's blind. Or the young kids will say, wow, your eyes are weird. Or like, man, you're scary. Or like, what happened to your eyes? And I used to get offended by that, but now I'm just kind of like, well, I'm going to be a music educator. I better get used to answering these questions.
Oh, man.
So Berkeley has an assistive technology lab that is dedicated to blind students and helping blind students. It's run by a professor named Chi Kim, who is also blind, and he is fantastic. So that was one of the really big reasons that I did choose Berkeley, was because I knew that I would have the resources to succeed and learn how to use all this music software and do all these things, and that I would have a support system. The thing that I wasn't prepared for was music education at Berkeley, because I was doing music education and performance, so those two majors combined. And the music education department had never had a blind student come through before. Wow. So I applied. I had an interview. But they met with disability services twice before the interview. So I was kind of wondering about that and why it had taken so long for me to get the interview. And during the interview, a lot of the faculty were like, well, how are you going to manage a classroom? How are you going to adapt these things? And I was saying, well, I don't know, because I'm not the teachers. Y'all are teaching me how to do this, and we will figure out ways on how to adapt it together, because I don't have the answers to all of that, because I've never had to do it before.
Wow.
And I just remember, like, the very first time I met with the chair of the department ever, when I was a freshman. It was my first semester before I was allowed to declare and all that. And he was like, this is a lot of work, right? Like, do you have people that can help you? Like, are they going to be able to help you with transportation? I was like, yeah, I'm aware. I know exactly what I need and what I can do. And, in my head, I was going, you have no idea who you're talking to, because I'm sassy and I know when to turn it off, but I really was tempted. And, now everything's fine. Like, the department is wonderful. The professors have all been wonderful, and the chair is wonderful. Like, everybody's, it came with me having to prove myself, I think, and having to show them that, hey, I'm resourceful. I have been raised and taught by a wonderful team of teachers and my mom to learn how to advocate and to learn exactly what I need and how to get that done. And I know what resources to go to for it. And by doing that, it has showed them, like, wow, like, I'm learning as an educator. And, this person really can do the things that we didn't realize she could do, or that, we weren't sure about. And, we're all still learning together. So I'm no longer, like, feeling like I have to prove myself, and I'm no longer worried about things, because I'm very open with all of them. They're very open with me on what they know and what they don't know. And it's a really good experience. And, we had to work up to that, obviously, but this is just one example of, like, the real world advocacy. Like, it's been an uphill battle for me to get the things that I need and for me to get where I want to be, but it's paving the way for whoever else wants to pursue it after me.
Yeah.
And I think, my goal as, in this career, because I'm a performer as well, I'm a singer-songwriter, and I obviously want to pursue that kind of career too. But if that doesn't work, and that doesn't usually pay the bills either, if it doesn't work, I want to be an educator. And, the common thing I get is, oh, so you're going to teach blind students? No, I mean, I'm not opposed to teaching blind students, but I want to teach everyone. I want to teach in a mainstream setting. I want to teach in a public school setting. And I want to use what I have and, my differences to help educate the next generation, to help lift them up, to help spread diversity, and also to help them realize, hey, you can do anything you put your mind to, regardless of gender, race, sexual orientation, disability, anything. It doesn't matter. And
yeah, how can the rest of us advocate for you and people that are disabled? I think everything you're saying is really mind-blowing, just realizing the weight and the responsibility that's been put on you. But watching you rise to the challenge, I'm sure, is so not only impressive, but also so edifying for the department, because that they will have your road that you've paved through this hard work, because you were willing to do it with them and for them. But how can we move forward in the future in a way that does advocate for you before, a disabled person walks into that space?
I think really just asking the questions, doing the research, talking to disabled people themselves, because I think a lot of what happens stems from assumptions and misconceptions. We have a really low employment rate because there's job discrimination. People think that disabled people and blind people can't do things, so we don't get jobs. They immediately discredit us because we're blind. There are parents of blind children. Like, people think that blind children or that blind parents can't parent. So there have been people that have gotten their kids taken from them solely because they were told that they couldn't parent, and people thought that they couldn't take care of their kids because they're blind.
Oh my gosh. Is this a recent story, or like is this still
This is
happening?
ongoing. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. That's
It's
awful.
crazy. And it's crazy because my fiance actually has a son.
Mhm.
And, you know, his son's mom is also blind. And like, there's just so many misconceptions about blind parents and parenting and this, that, and the other. And he's, you know, had to deal with those things too. And, you know, I think about it, and I know that there's people out there that look at me and go, oh, wow, like, how are you going to have a family? How are you going to have kids? Like, you're just a cute little, you know, blind girl. Like, they don't see me as a strong, independent woman. They see, oh, poor thing. And that's not it. That's not it at all.
Yeah, I can tell by talking to you for 5 seconds.
Well, good. I think it's like there's a lot there. There's the sass. You know, I always tell people, because I'm really loud, and so they always go, well, can you quiet down a bit? I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm just Puerto Rican, I can't help it, leave me alone. But yeah, I think there's a lot, and I think just keeping an open mind and educating, and really learning from the people that know what they've dealt with. I think that it's hard, because if you haven't met somebody who has a disability or who is blind or visually impaired or whatever, you wouldn't know what that's like, and it scares you. The thought of it scares everyone. It's like one of the worst fears of people in the US, going blind or being blind. That's how bad it is. Like, there are these things that are like, we'll blindfold you and you'll know what it's like to eat blind, or you'll, like the Bird Box movie. After the Bird Box movie, like, everybody was trying to do the Bird Box challenge and just put on a blindfold and try to do stuff. That's not what our life is like. We learn how to do things non-visually. We have techniques, and there are training centers and things like that. There are ways that we learn how to adapt things so that we can do them safely and we can get the job done. It's so the reality of blindness isn't, oh, let's just throw you into this and you're not going to know anything and you'll be terrified. That's not how it works.
Yeah,
And so that already perpetuates like the stereotypes.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you for bringing that up, because I just watched that Bird Box challenge. I did not participate, but it never occurred to me until this moment how counterproductive that would be, because all that does is show sighted people that being blind renders you not as capable in the world, which is the opposite message we should be giving at any given time about any person.
Yeah, and there's this really big organization that I'm heavily involved in. It's called the National Federation of the Blind. Mm-hmm. And it is an organization it's run by blind people. And the whole tagline is live the life you want, and, you know, transforming dreams into reality. And there's so much that the Federation does. They focus on legislature that will help advance, you know, there's this act, 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act, that allows employers to pay workers with disabilities less than the minimum wage.
What?
And that's still happening in some states, and it hasn't been abolished. And so
my God.
That's one of the things that they work on. They work on initiatives for students getting accessible materials in higher education. There are resources for blind parents and stuff like that. There's so many facets of that organization. We have a blind performing arts division. We have a blind lawyers division. There's all kinds of initiatives, and it's such a big organization. And that's another place to go for resources. If there's people who want to learn more and want to understand, then go check out their website. They have literature that you can read. There's all kinds of information up there, videos, speeches from past presidents, and all these kinds of things. There's a lot that you can learn from that. So that's something that I'm really excited to be a part of, because, you know, my passion also lies in helping blind students to reach their potential, and you know, really just helping other blind people who may not be on my level, because, you know, there are people, as there are on any spectrum, who don't have the resources or the circumstances to have the same access that I've been lucky enough to have, and that people have fought for me to have.
Yeah. Your
and
mother
I'm so grateful
championing
for that.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, like I have privilege in that way. It's really exhilarating to be a part of this kind of movement as well. I really just want to lift up all of the communities that I represent with the platforms and the voice that I do have right now. I remember when I first saw your channel, I was like, wow, this woman is fantastic. Like, I just resonated so much because you were like, I'm a progressive Christian, and yes, LGBTQ, yes, sex positive, yes. It's like, what? Me too. How? Like, it was just so refreshing to see that, because people either view it as conservative, or if you're a Christian, you're really conservative and you only have these particular views, and I can't talk to somebody who's a Christian because they're going to shut me down for this, this, and this. But like,
welcome
I don't
to the community.
Yeah, like I don't feel the need to like outwardly just be like, hi, how are you? I'm a Christian, but like my whole thing is leading by example. And if I get asked about my personal opinions and my beliefs, I'll proudly and whatever, I'll say it. But I just really think it's important to just practice, like, especially coming from somebody who's a minority in a couple different ways. Like, it's important to really just accept people where they are and to love everybody. And really, loving means not judging. And we all judge. Like, it's something that we can't, like, none of us are perfect. But I really try to do my best to not judge other people, because I know how it feels to be judged and to be, underestimated and all of those things. So I really just try to practice every day to do the best that I can, and kind of ask God, like, hey, can you help me figure out what it is I'm supposed to do here, because I don't want to do the wrong thing. So
that humility and posture is so beautiful. I think that's the best we can all say right now. Like, people of faith, look heavenward and stop and pause and just ask, what can I do? What is the best pathway forward?
Yeah, because I'm also like, I'm super sensitive. So I feel everything, I take it in, and then sometimes I put things on myself that I know I can't realistically carry. And I'm like, well, what more can I do? Especially with the events happening today. I'm like, I want to do everything. I don't feel okay being happy. If they're unhappy, I don't feel right about this. But also I think about it and I'm like, well, I also have to be okay. If I want to help them fight, I have to be okay. And so it's this balance that I'm really struggling with, because, it's the whole, you have to fill your cup before you can fill others. And like, having anxiety with depressive symptoms, it's like I have to decompress and I have to look away for a little bit and catch my breath sometimes. But does that make me a bad person for not just completely throwing myself into this?
Yeah.
And I think it's just hard. And I'm constantly like, God, what can I do? Like, am I doing enough? Is this enough? What more can I do? Please help me to just be supportive. And, I've been trying to reach out to friends and just make sure they're okay, and like sharing everything that I can on social media that's informative and helpful, and having hard conversations with people. It's a lot. It's a lot to carry. And I think it's very easy to get really, really overwhelmed. And so I think the best thing to do in those situations is just ask God, like, what is there that you can use me for?
Amen. Beautiful. Precious. It's been so delightful talking to you. I really, really appreciate it. I'm
This
so
is
glad
super
you
exciting. Yeah, I remember I was like, she's probably not even gonna answer me. Like, I know these YouTubers are so busy, like, but I think I thought about it a couple months ago, and I was like in the middle of school and stuff. I was like, I don't have time. It's okay. I don't have to do this. And then for some reason, like in the middle of a day sometime during quarantine, I was like, something just told me like, hey, you should do this again. I was like, okay, sure. And so I did, and then you answered, and I was like, what?
Oh, girl, that is true alignment, I believe, because I don't ever want to give the impression I don't read emails. I do, but also a lot of them are novels, and I appreciate it so much. But I really do try to be guided by the Holy Spirit and figure out you know, who I should be speaking to help platform, help amplify their voice, their story, whatever. And yours was just like highlighted. I just saw
Yeah.
it clear
It's
as
so
day.
funny because like I felt it. I was like, you know, I'm not gonna do this, and I feel like God was just like, girl, just press the button. Just
I
press the
love it.
button.
Thank you for listening. And the God is Great community has been asking me to speak about this for a really long time. And, you know, you can feel paralyzed when you're outside of these minority groups and think, oh, well, no one wants to hear my voice on it, or there's nothing I can do. And that's just simply not true.
Yeah.
Because we
Like
do have,
empathy, support, and just
yeah,
doing what you can and what you're able to is
yeah.
important. And just, you know, even just saying like, I'm here. What can I do? I stand with you. That's really what matters.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Do you want people to be able to contact you with questions, or is that
Oh,
overwhelming?
absolutely,
Okay.
yes. At precious underscore Puerto Rican 20.
Okay.
My website has everything. It's got links to all of my social medias, and that's preciousperezmusica.com.
So yeah, I love this openness, and I would encourage anyone that has any questions, obviously come with humility and true, you know, inquisitiveness. And Precious is open, which is so wonderful. Thank you for standing in that gap for people that, you know, nobody has to stand in that gap. It's I know a heavy burden to bear, and it's a lot of work. So I'm grateful that you're there, and I just want to thank you so much. We love you all.
Love
God
you all.
bless.
Bendiciones.